Sir Liam Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's always a pleasure to follow the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Birmingham Hodge Hill, and I rise to echo the comments made by my Right Honourable friend for Chingford and Woodford Green, comments which he made extremely eloquently and clearly, to which I would like to add just a few comments of my own. I've always been in favour of CPTPP, and as I said when I was at the front bench in 2019, it's absolutely essential, particularly given the rise of protectionism globally, that we commit ourselves to a rules-based system based on the WTO. Of course, we have the abilities to augment that by other regional relationships, which is why we've had the public consultation and debate in Parliament about potential accession to CPTPP. I have always believed that the benefits of CPTPP have always been at least as much about geopolitics than they have been about simple import and export numbers. As the Royal United Services Institute put it, joining CPTPP provides the UK with not just economic benefits, but the means to help define and defend a rules-based order in the face of China's diplomatic and economic heft. So, at a time of tense relations, as they are between China and the United States, the United Kingdom has joined a trade agreement in which neither are present at the present time, although the United States was instrumental in its creation, a point I shall return to later. The March 2023 Integrated Review Refresh describes the Indo-Pacific as, and I quote, critical to the UK's economy, security, and our interest in an open and stable international order. Developments there will have disproportionate influence on the global economy, on supply chains, as the Right Honourable Gentleman immediately before me mentioned, strategic stability, and the norms of state behaviour. So CPTPP, in turn, is about the contribution to the stability of the global trade and investment system. So, within that debate, what do we perceive China's security threat to the United Kingdom to be? Well, in its reply to the Intelligence and Security Committee, in the section entitled The Strategic Context, the government stated that China almost certainly maintains the largest state intelligence apparatus in the world. The nature and scale of the Chinese intelligence services are, like many aspects of the Chinese government, hard to grasp for the outsider due to the size of the bureaucracy, the blurring of the lines of accountability between the party and state officials, a partially decentralised system, and a lack of verifiable information. Now, the government has also set out that the Chinese intelligence services target the UK and its overseas interests prolifically and aggressively. While they seek to obtain classified information, they are willing to utilise intelligence officers and agents to collect open-source information indiscriminately, given the vast resources at their disposal. And then, to compound the problem, it's not just the Chinese intelligence services. The Chinese Communist Party co-opts every state institution, company and citizen. And this whole-of-state approach means that China can aggressively target the UK and UK interests, wherever those interests are globally, which sadly we have discovered to our cost in many of our governmental institutions here. So, the question given all of that is that could China actually be admitted to CPTPP? And if it's theoretically possible, how likely is it? Well, I think it's instructive first to look at the WTO experience, which my right honourable friend on the front bench and I shared over several years of my extremely enjoyable working with him at DIT. When China acceded to the WTO in 2001, the West saw it as promising and promoting economic and political reform. It was a time of great optimism that the Chinese communist system could be pulled in a direction that was advantageous to and in the interests of the West. However, Jiang Zemin, the Chinese leader at the time, claimed that the motive of the United States in all of this was to, quote, westernize and divide socialist countries. Thus, the WTO itself was heading for a stalemate in its direction of travel, almost from the point at which China acceded to it. Now, this has added to the other WTO problems. And I mention this because we need to look at CPT within that wider trading framework. The WTO's problems have been compounded by its adoption of the concept of unanimity, whereas its rules talk about consensus. Now, if consensus and unanimity meant the same thing, there wouldn't be two different words for it in the founding documents. But it has meant that virtually any country within the WTO now exercises a right of veto. And this has prevented us from moving forward in what we perceived it to be a process of genuine liberalisation of global trade. Now, there's not been a single... I will.
I apologise for interrupting his excellent speech. But, of course, the key was we were told at the time, and this persuaded the government, that this would change China. And, in fact, what we've found is that China is now changing the terms of the debate because they haven't changed at all. If anything, they got worse. So isn't that a very good reason why we need to debate these issues whenever we can?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. And as I mentioned at the time, President Clinton took the view that this was the best hope that the West had of pulling China into a much more market-orientated, rules-based economy, where we could get the benefits of a more liberal global economy. That is not how it turned out. In fact, we've only had one multilateral treaty since the WTO was created, and that was the 2017 Trade Facilitation Agreement. So there's a hierarchy of the agreements that we can get in terms of liberalisation. A multilateral agreement is the best, but given, as I've said, the effective veto that countries have, that's unlikely, and it's very unlikely to give us the benefits that we'd like to see, especially in trade liberalisation in services. The next best is a plurilateral agreement, the next best is regional, and then you're down to what some people would unkindly describe as the bargain basement of bilateral FTAs. But all of them are useful in creating a more liberal global trading environment. But if China were to seek to join CPTPP, it would need to commit to liberalisation in line with CPTPP requirements, and this would require there to be a reduced role for the Chinese state. Now, if anyone who watches current affairs thinks that the Chinese state is tending in the direction of a smaller influence, then they're watching different news outlets from I am. China could, of course, seek a bespoke agreement in terms of joining CPTPP, but the UK has already set the precedent by joining on current terms. And even if they could join CPTPP, China, could it be trusted to meet any of the conditions of accession? Although Chinese leaders have declared their willingness to meet the conditions, many countries are extremely sceptical given China's behaviour as a WTO member. China has a poor record when it comes to complying with WTO rules and observing the fundamental principles on which the WTO agreements are based, principles of non-discrimination, openness, reciprocity, fairness and transparency. And China's subsidies, overcapacity, intellectual property theft and protectionist non-market policies exacerbate distortions in the global economy. And even more worrying than all of these, China's use of trade as a tool of coercive diplomacy has raised concerns further, especially given their behaviour towards Australia and to Japan. This is not the sort of partner we should be wishing to see join us in CPTPP, unless there are previously unimagined changes in behaviour. And finally, Mr. Speaker, a word, if I may, beyond this chamber to our US colleagues. I believe that the decision to leave TPP by the United States was a mistake. It removed from United States policymakers a tool in terms of its strategic ability to shape events in the region. UK accession provides an opportunity for the United States to seek to join this new grouping and gain greater direct influence over China trade relations with the fastest growing economic zone in the world. All of these are reasons why we must have a very close eye on what happens with China and our new membership of CPTPP. We have gained a great deal. We can't afford to have it thrown away by ourselves or by others.